Good afternoon and welcome to Developmental Psychology week. I believe we're in week 9 now, as we are proceeding now, coming out of the school years, middle childhood, and this week we'll start to look at issues having to do with the onset of puberty and adolescence, and that's always a fun time. I personally love to interact with adolescents, especially young adolescents, because there are so many wonderful things going on. So many of these emotional and social and cognitive abilities that we develop at that age. It's a great time because kids are good, and even when they're not good, often they're not good because they're undergoing these issues of trying to figure out who they are and what's important to them and all. Um, I, I I'm not feeling like I'm really saying what I want to say there, but um, I really am just kind of laying it out for you. Take what it will, take from it what you will, and I hope you do enjoy the reading on adolescence. Anyway, last week we had a discussion well, it was an assignment on really thinking about what you would determine to be important in the perfect school, the best kind of school. Got some great conversation on that, and this is not something that often people are used to talking about and thinking about, because most of us have an experience with school that's the school is already the structure that's there. We really What we have to learn is really how to navigate it as the way it is already. So when I ask questions like, well, what would you do in the perfect school? It's not something that comes easy for us to think about. We might be able to think about the things we didn't like about the schools we went to, but it's harder to contemplate and to comprehend those issues that we would say, what will we do to change it? And what do you think would really work? Consequently, I found that a lot of your answers really focused on this idea of control and strength and controlling strong leadership, um, which is kind of interesting because I don't know that when we're young, we're in elementary school, we are really so interested in stronger leadership. That probably signifies or signals that many of us are now the parents of children, and we would be more comfortable if our children were in a school where obedience was, I don't know, I want to say demanded, but there's control, there's a strong structure, there's strong organization, you know what you're going to get. Um, there are other issues in school, like how exactly the children are learning. And it's interesting because I'm not sure we always think about what exactly would be necessary for children to learn. Um, the approach that most of the time that most people take is, if I just crack that whip harder, if I just threaten them more, that they'll just knuckle under and learn, as if learning is something that you don't want to do, that you have to be threatened to do. If you remember, children who are in that early childhood stage, 3, 4, 5 years old, you remember, this was a time that we were hungry to learn. And maybe learning is not something we really have to threaten people to do, but what we have to do is entice them to continue to learn, because they probably, at some level, want to do so. So I think something else, just looking at the technical and practical suggestions that were made, I'll call out Sarah Williams, who mentioned the need for a shorter school day. And what was funny was, you look at somebody like Samantha, you said school needs to take more of the day and it needs to be longer because there are more things. You probably were both saying the same thing as far as the things that you want. just two different ways of getting it, which is really the way things are with schools and school leadership. Is there are a lot of ideas out there how to reach this stuff, and some of it sounds contradictory. It's what we have to remember though is the heart of it, the real motivation is not. It's not that controversial. It's not that contradictory. Um, Tracy, you mentioned something about Zen time. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, interesting suggestion. Um, but if you've ever worked, if we ever worked with children who were in elementary school or have elementary school children, or at least all of us have been elementary school children, if you think back on that, you know remember that things are not always easy, and sometimes, especially when we have all of this material that we're trying to put on the kids, that can be a sort of a stressful occurrence, a stressful experience. So maybe one thing that would be good was giving children a time to sort of think about it and analyze and interact with what they're learning. Um, Akila, I believe that's how you say your name, Akila, mentioned parental involvement. All good teachers would say the same thing. If parents could be more involved, um, and if you think about it, how much parents have already been involved in the education of children. As parents, we are primarily responsible for the children being ready for school, being ready behaviorally, being ready cognitively, uh, um, making the decisions of right and wrong, the moral decisions, teaching them how to do that, and encouraging them and giving them opportunities, modeling pro-social ability, all of that. I remember when I was a public school teacher, um, somebody said something at a faculty meeting, and I thought that is really a good way to think about it, because this person was talking about the issue of homeschooling and having homeschoolers who had started to take public school classes and entered the public schools and how they were doing. And this teacher says, well, after all good education begins with home education. And we certainly see that the influence of parental involvement. You can almost always tell the difference between children in your class, if you're a teacher, children in your class who have strong parental involvement and those who don't. And I'm not talking about tiger parenting or threatening your child, don't bring home less than an A or I'll beat you or whatever. And I'm not even talking about parents who say, bring home an A and I'll give you $100. I'm talking about parents who say every day, what'd you learn? Let's talk about it and what went on and all of that. That kind of involvement is good. All right, so again, have fun with this next chapter as we're entering the wonderful world of puberty. I encourage you to think back on your own experiences entering puberty, and I hope you have a great week and take care of yourselves, and I will see you week 10 next week.